IELTS Practice Listening Test. You will hear 4 different recordings and will answer questions on what you hear. You will have time to read the instructions and questions and will have time to check your answers. All recordings will be played only once. The test has 4 sections. Write all your answers in your question booklet. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1 in your question booklet. Section 1. You will hear a tourist talking to a tourist information officer. Before you start listening, you have 30 seconds to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4. You will see that there is an example. On this occasion only, the conversation related to the example will be played first. Good afternoon. Can I help you?
Yes, I've just arrived in town and I was wondering if I could get some maps and some ideas about what to do while I'm here.
Sure. This map is a good one for the main attractions in town, like the zoo, the opera house, the botanical gardens. Is that the kind of thing you're looking for, or are you more interested in shopping?
Both, actually.
Well, I recommend doing your shopping later, as the best places to shop are quite away from here. The officer says that the shopping is quite away from where they are, so the answer is D, far away. Now we shall begin. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4. Good afternoon. Can I help you?
Yes, I've just arrived in town and I was wondering if I could get some maps and some ideas about what to do while I'm here.
Sure. This map is a good one for the main attractions in town, like the zoo, the opera house, the botanical gardens. Is that the kind of thing you were looking for, or are you more interested in shopping?
Both, actually.
Well, I recommend doing your shopping later, as the best places to shop are quite away from here. How about starting with the opera house?
Yes, I've seen a lot of pictures of it, and I've heard it's one place I should definitely go.
Yes, it's on the top of most people's lists because it's so well known. There are tours of the building, but try to get a ticket to a performance if you can. But remember, shows are often sold out, so go to the box office early if you're interested. Sounds
good. And what about the zoo? Is it far from here?
Not too far, but it's definitely worth a visit.
Really?
Yes, some new exhibits have just opened, which let visitors see the animals, and then the keepers give hourly talks and tours on different animals.
All right.
But if you do decide to go, I'd recommend going in the afternoon, as there are usually a lot of people there in the morning with school groups.
Thanks, but I'm not that interested in going there.
So how about the art gallery? A new exhibition has just opened, and it's a great place to have lunch. Try the coffee shop or take a sandwich and have it in the sculpture garden. It's such a quiet place to relax, you forget you're in the middle of town.
Good idea. And I've heard that the botanical gardens are also a nice place to have lunch.
Yes. Even though it's also right in the middle of town, it has a huge selection of native plants. In fact, you won't find such a wide selection of rare species anywhere else in the country.
I might head down there and take a look.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 5 to 8.
And how do I get to the other places?
Well, look at your map. The art gallery isn't far from Central Station. Just go up Main Street and cross over River Road. It's on the left, opposite the post office.
And the botanical gardens?
They're on the river. Go along River Road towards Parkville. Cross the bridge, then it's on your left. You won't miss it. There are signs from the bridge.
Isn't the zoo by the river too?
Yes, it isn't far from the botanical gardens. Go down River Road again towards Parkville, but this time it's on your left just before the bridge. You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 8 to 10.
Now, while I'm here, I'd like to go out for dinner, but I've got no idea what the restaurants are like.
Well, we've got lots of restaurants in and around town. It just depends on what you're looking for.
Any suggestions?
Yes, there's the Grand Hotel, which is a big 5-star hotel not far from here. It's international-style food, but it is a little expensive. Expect to pay around $50 per head there.
Gosh, that's quite a lot.
Yes, but there are no surprises on the menu, so there's always something for everyone.
Anything a little smaller and maybe cheaper?
Yes, Mama's is more affordable. It's a little place tucked in behind the Grand which serves authentic local food. It's one of the few restaurants where you can try the local cuisine. It's a great place, but you should know that it closes early. Last order's at 9.
Oh, that's no good. I don't want to go somewhere that closes that early. I want to make a night of it.
Then there's the Riverside restaurant, which specialises in seafood.
Sounds good.
Yes, it's not too expensive either. Just average, but the view is sensational. People go there just to look at the view across the river over the town. The place has a great atmosphere too. It's the place to be seen, so you'll need a reservation or you'll never get a table.
I'll give them a call now. Thanks for your help.
You're welcome. That is the end of section 1. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2 in your question booklet. Section 2. You will hear a talk by a staff member of a wildlife park to people visiting the park. Before you start listening, you have 30 seconds to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Reptile Wildlife Park. We want you to enjoy your time with us at the park today, so let me give you some information before we begin the tour so you can make the most of your day here. First of all, as today is Friday, let me remind you that the park closes at 5 o'clock this afternoon, so make sure you've seen everything by then. I always let visitors know this as we don't close until 6 o'clock on Saturdays and Sundays. Now, entrance to the park is $18 for adults, $12 for children and pensioners, and we have a special family rate of $50. We also offer small group tours of the park led by a guide for an extra $3. Included in the price are our daily animal shows, starting with the bird show at 10 every morning, followed by kangaroo feeding at midday. Then at 2 o'clock, it's a talk about koalas by one of our staff. She'll tell you everything you need to know about those famous Australian animals. If you need a break from the wildlife at any time during the day, we have plenty to offer. Our cafe serves delicious snacks and meals, and if you have brought your own, there's a large picnic area under the trees. There's also a playground for the kids and gift shop for souvenirs. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention our Friends of the Park membership. For $50 a year, members receive a newsletter notifying them of park news and any upcoming special events. What is more, you'll get 10% off entrance fees and a voucher from the gift shop.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 15 to 20.
Now, let me tell you where everything is. From the ticket office, take the path past the pond. The first enclosure you'll come to at the end of the path is the Reptile Enclosure. It houses small and large lizards and also some of Australia's deadliest snakes. Next to the reptiles towards the highway are Australia's biggest birds, the emus. Right near that, between the emus and the ticket office, is our new children's playground. It's fully fenced and shady and is a great place to take a break with the kids. Another good place for families is the picnic area, which is under the trees next to the river. It's lovely and peaceful, which is why our koala exhibit is nearby. Also, don't miss the nocturnal animals, which are right next door to the koalas. The special lights allow you to watch the native marsupials running around. Now the largest enclosure is for the kangaroos, which need lots of space to hop around. Their area goes from the river right across to the car park. And at the end of the day, don't forget our fantastic gift shop next door to us here at the ticket office. It's got postcards, pens, stuffed animals, all kinds of great gift ideas. Finally, just a couple of points I need to mention today. Firstly, unfortunately the emu exhibit is closed temporarily. Don't worry, they're not sick. In fact, it's good news. Some baby emus have just hatched. The chicks are healthy, but we want to give them some privacy, so we're waiting a while until we decide whether we should move the mother and babies to their own enclosure or not. They're 5 days old, and although we would normally only wait a week before allowing the public to see them, we've decided to close it for 2 weeks. Now, our most popular exhibit is always the kangaroos, so make sure you get down there as you are allowed to walk through that particular part of the park and get close to the animals. Don't forget the feeding show at midday when a member of our staff lets a few visitors feed the kangaroos by hand. Tell your guide if you'd like to do this and they'll let staff know who you are. I should also mention other good times to see the kangaroos. They're often active in the morning, but we're already a bit late for that, so if you happen to still be in the park near closing time, go and take a look, because just before the sun goes down is the best time to see them. Finally, children who have been to the park before often ask me what happened to the huge old playground that we used to have. Unfortunately, we had to get rid of the old wooden one because it was outdated, and frankly, a little bit dangerous. The new plastic modern one might not be as original and interesting as the old one was, but children still seem to enjoy it. So everybody, I hope you enjoy your day at the park with us, and if you have any questions, please speak to a member of staff.
That is the end of section 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now turn to Section 3 in your question booklet. Section 3. 2 high school students are reporting to their class about a project they have done on an Australian animal called the Tasmanian devil. Before you start listening, you have 30 seconds to look at questions 21 to 25. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi everyone, George and I are going to talk to you today about that unusual animal, the Tasmanian devil.
Yeah. Now, perhaps you remember the character called Taz in the Bugs Bunny cartoons. Well, real Tasmanian devils are nothing like that. In fact, they don't deserve to be called devils, though they do have some strange habits.
Anyway, as their name indicates, they only live on the island of Tasmania. You can find them all over the island, including in the southwest rainforests and in coastal areas. But they're mostly found in the drier forests in the eastern and northern parts of the island.
In fact, they live any place where they can get shelter during the day and food at night.
Some of you may have seen one in a zoo. They're about the size of a small dog and are covered with short, soft, black fur with white markings on some parts of their bodies. An adult male can weigh from 5 to 13 kilograms and a female from 4.5 to 9 kilograms.
They've got a large head and neck with heavy limbs.
And they're called devils because of the terrible sounds they make at night, which has given them an undeserved reputation for being aggressive, whereas in fact they're fairly shy creatures, so they're not really friendly enough to be pets.
Like kangaroos, they carry their babies in a pouch.
They have babies only once a year, and then about 20 are born at the one time. But at that stage, they're only as big as a grain of rice. Then the babies have a race to the pouch because there are only 4 teats there. The mother raises an average of 3 young, though sometimes 4 survive.
I think we should say something about their numbers at this stage.
Okay, but just a bit about how they're brought up first. They stay in the pouch for about 5 months. Then they're left in the nest or are carried on their mother's back when she goes out, and eventually they have to look after themselves at about 8 months.
And around 60% of them die in their first summer due to the tough competition for food. They start breeding at the end of their second year and live for up to 7 years, which means they don't live as long as the average domestic dog.
No, and it's estimated that now there are between 100,000 and 150,000 of them. They were almost wiped out by the early white settlers because they hated the devils eating their chickens, so the government paid people to kill Tasmanian devils. To this day, most farmers still dislike them. Their numbers fell so drastically due to farmers poisoning them or shooting them that it was thought that they might have become extinct. Then a law was passed in 1941 to protect them, and since then their numbers have grown again.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 26 to 30.
Now we want to talk about some of their habits. They live alone in places like hollow logs, caves, or in burrows underground, which they line with bark, grass, and leaves. They usually move slowly and look clumsy when they move quickly, but the young ones are more agile and can even climb trees.
But one of the most amazing things about Tasmanian devils is how and what they eat. They've got incredibly strong teeth and jaws, so a large male can give you a bite as strong as a 50-kilogram dog.
But don't worry, they don't eat people. Some farmers complain about them taking young lambs, but their diet consists mostly of animals which have already died. Strangely, they don't get ill when they eat sick animals because they've got digestive enzymes which kill the diseases in their own stomachs. So in that way, they help prevent diseases from spreading. And they've got an undeserved reputation for being smelly, but in fact they wash themselves as much as cats do.
They're nocturnal animals, so nighttime doesn't involve sleep. So they spend this time hunting, often travelling 15 kilometres and using their strong sense of smell to find food. They eat everything, including fur, and leave nothing behind except the largest bones. They go for wombats, wallabies, possums, birds, reptiles, amphibians, insects, fish, just about anything. Sometimes they raid chicken farms, which doesn't make them very popular with the farmers.
Yeah, there can be up to 22 of them feeding off one carcass at the same time, and they're very greedy, noisy eaters with coughing, barking, and so on. It's quite common for them to bite each other to decide who can eat first, who goes second, and so on.
They've got an incredible appetite. They can eat the equivalent of 40% of their own body weight in just half an hour, which is like a human eating about 25 kilograms of steak.
And they make really good use of those strong, blunt teeth. When they're frightened, they show them by yawning, which is more effective than biting or barking. And when they're under stress, they emit a strong smell.
But the only serious fighting that takes place is when they're looking for a mate. All in all, they're a fascinating little animal.
That's the end of section 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. Now turn to section 4 in your question booklet. Section 4. Sally McBean is an archaeological scientist. In the following talk, she discusses the latest research on the Iceman. Before you start listening, you have 30 seconds to look at questions 31 to 35. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 35.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You may remember that in 1991, a couple who were hiking high in the mountains on the border of Italy and Austria found the body of a man who died 5,300 years ago. This makes him older than the Egyptian mummies. This corpse was later given the nickname the Iceman. Fortunately, a complete set of clothes and a variety of gear were found on or near the corpse, and they give us further clues as to his identity. I'd like to speak to you today about some of the latest findings on the Iceman. Scientists have learned from the Iceman's corpse in the same way detectives investigating a murder gather clues from the victim's body. The study of the Iceman's bones show that he was 46 years old at the time of death, which is relatively old for people at that time. There was speculation as to where he'd come from originally, because the area where the corpse was found is not a place which is suitable for permanent human settlement. It's nearly always covered by snow and ice. But in 1991, the ice had melted due to the unusually warm weather and because of dust which had blown there from the Sahara. Subsequently, DNA analysis indicated that he belonged to a group from Central Northern Europe rather than from Mediterranean people who lived not very far to the south of the spot where his body was found. Yet it seems he may have moved around somewhat during his life. although exactly where he spent his life is unknown. Investigation of his tooth enamel suggests that he grew up in one place and then spent several decades in another area. Due to his age and what he ate, his teeth were in fact very worn. Samples taken from his stomach and intestines give us some clues as to what he'd eaten shortly before his death, including grains. However, samples of his hair show that he usually ate plants and the meat of several animals. He lived in a time long before the development of modern medicine, but the tattoos which appear on his back were probably there for the purpose of acupuncture therapy. It seems that he was not in a good state of health in the last 6 months of his life. There are 3 lines known as Bowes lines on the single fingernail that was found. These lines occur if the nail stops growing due to illness and then starts growing again. It was initially assumed that he had died of the cold in autumn because of the presence of a piece of fruit which ripens in late summer. Yet, there is now strong botanical evidence that he died in spring. This is because pollen from the hop hornbeam tree was found in his intestines, and that small tree blooms only in late spring. So he may have breathed some in or drunk some water containing pollen shortly before his death.
You now have 30 seconds to look at questions 36 to 40.
The Iceman ate a primitive form of wheat which was baked into bread on an open fire. The meat he consumed included red deer and wild goat, but it seems not to have included seafood, most likely because he didn't live near the coast. Interestingly, the cap he was wearing was made from bearskin. Leaves of moss was found in his intestines. It appears that moss was not part of his diet, but had probably entered his mouth by accident. In those days, they had no paper bags or plastic wrapping, and so used moss to pack food in. Moss was a very handy plant, also being used by the Vikings and others as toilet paper. The equipment found around the body gives us many clues as to his way of life. He was well prepared for climbing through the mountain pass, with a jacket made from deer hide and goat hide, and a pair of shoes made from the skin of both goat and bear, and then insulated with grass. Over the top of it all, he was wearing a cape made from grass and bast, which is made from bark. In fact, this cape resembles capes worn by shepherds in the Balkans, and the site where he was found is near an area where shepherds traditionally take their flocks in summer. Yet, the theory that he was a shepherd has little else to support it. It's been proposed that he was a hunter due to the fact that he was carrying a bow and arrows. Some earlier ideas that he was a warrior or a trader of flint have been abandoned for lack of any supporting material. So what was he doing up there in the mountains, apparently by himself? Did he die from exhaustion and cold while running away from danger? Was he murdered? We may never know exactly what the cause of death was, because this would require an autopsy, which has not been allowed because it would cause too much damage to the corpse. X-rays have shown an object which appears to be an arrowhead in his back under his left shoulder. Yet, even if he was shot with an arrow, it was not necessarily the cause of death. There's a deep wound on his right hand from where he was stabbed with a knife, and he was carrying an axe. Was it perhaps for his own protection against his enemies? The Iceman was found lying on a large rock, and so it was believed initially that he had fallen asleep on the rock and then died. It's more likely that he died nearby and then floated into that position during periods when the ice had thawed. There are several indicators for this. Firstly, the awkward position of his left arm. Secondly, the position of his right hand, which was stuck under another rock. Thirdly, the missing outer layer of skin and the fact that some of his belongings are a few meters from the body. Despite these interesting findings, there are still very many things that we don't know about the Iceman. When the body was first removed, they thought it was a missing mountain climber, so a lot of evidence was destroyed. But hopefully, with further research, we will be able to solve some of the mysteries which still surround the Iceman.
That is the end of section 4. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers for sections 1 to 4 onto your answer sheet.